The FIA has recently landed in hot waters due to its latest decisions during the Austin and Mexico Grand Prix events, igniting heated debates across the motorsport community. One of the primary sources of frustration lies in the inconsistency of penalties handed out to drivers. The conversation has now reached a tipping point, with almost every driver agreeing that the current state of affairs demands an overhaul. In fact, 19 out of the 20 drivers have voiced the need for change, stating that something is fundamentally wrong with how certain individuals approach races. The burning question remains, will these changes take effect starting from the next race in Brazil? And perhaps more intriguingly, could we witness a revision of the rulebook before the 2024 season draws to a close? With all eyes on the upcoming races, anticipation among fans has soared. One of the most controversial moments in Mexico involved a dangerous incident that forced the FIA to intervene with strict measures. The penalties involved two separate 10-second sanctions against a particular driver following two contentious moves at Turn 4 and Turn 8 against Norris. Turn 4, however, sparked the most discussion. Observers couldn't help but draw comparisons between this incident and a similar scenario that played out a few weeks earlier in Austin, where Russell had pushed Bottas off the track. The difference? While Russell only received a 5-second penalty, the other driver was slapped with a harsher 10-second penalty, raising questions about fairness and consistency. According to the rules, if a driver deliberately forces another competitor off the track to gain an advantage, the recommended penalty is a 10-second time addition. So, in theory, the punishment in Mexico wasn't entirely out of the blue or without precedent. However, the inconsistency between Austin and Mexico has left drivers feeling frustrated, pushing them to gather and deliberate on what should be deemed acceptable behavior on the track. Russell, without naming anyone specifically, emphasized the collective agreement among drivers. He stated, 19 out of 20 of us are aligned what we've seen is reckless, and it has to change. This isn't something we can wait to address until 2025, it needs to happen right now, starting from Brazil. His words reflect the sense of urgency shared across the grid, as the drivers seek to avoid further confusion in upcoming races. The tension has also highlighted a deeper issue. Many drivers and fans feel that inconsistencies in steward decisions are creating a sense of bias. During both the Austin and Mexico events, specific stewards with notable connections to certain teams were assigned, raising concerns about impartiality. For instance, in Mexico, the stewarding team included Johnny Herbert and Tim Mayer. Herbert has a known history of tension with one driver, while Mayer, being the son of a McLaren founder, sparked speculation about favoritism. Similarly, in Austin, Derek Warwick, a steward with partial ownership in Honda, was involved, adding another layer to the controversy. These associations, even if unintentional, have added fuel to the fire, causing many to question whether penalties are being handed out fairly. While the 10-second penalties in Mexico were deemed justified, the incident at Turn 4 left some teams frustrated. They argued that a 5-second penalty, matching the precedent set during Russell's maneuver against Bottas in Austin, would have been more appropriate. Red Bull's Christian Horner also expressed frustration, pointing out that Norris entered the corner at a speed 15 km/h faster than his quickest lap. In his view, this indicated that Norris's goal wasn't to make a clean pass, but to simply get ahead of Verstappen at the apex and defend his position from there. Horner added that Verstappen has used similar tactics before, but the recent penalties suggest that the rules are becoming increasingly unclear. The crux of the issue lies in how overtakes are now being judged. Traditionally, taking the outside line has been regarded as a high-risk move, leaving the driver exposed. However, the current interpretation of the rules appears to favor drivers taking the outside route, as having just the nose of their car ahead is now enough to establish an advantage. This shift makes things frustrating, said Horner. We shouldn't need to consult the rulebook for every overtaking or defending move. Racing has always been about instincts, but now it feels overregulated. As the drivers adapt to these new interpretations, many fear that the sport could lose its essence if the FIA continues down this path. Horner warns that over-regulating could encourage behavior that deviates from the spirit of true racing. Similarly, Red Bull's advisors Helmut Marko and Horner felt that the penalty in Mexico was unnecessarily harsh. They believe the decision was made in the heat of the moment, influenced by the chaotic events in Austin, where Norris was also penalized, costing him a podium finish. As the season progresses, the spotlight will remain on how drivers adjust their racing styles under tighter scrutiny. With only a handful of races and 2 sprint events left, the stakes couldn't be higher. Progressive moves, especially those like the ones seen in Mexico at turns 4 and 8, are likely to face zero tolerance. FIA officials have made it clear defensive actions that endanger rivals will be met with immediate penalties. Toto Wolff, Mercedes team principal, sees this as a positive shift. He believes drivers will welcome the clarity, saying, "When the rules become clearer, drivers will push to the limit but not beyond it. If aggressive moves are penalized consistently, the racing will naturally improve." Wolff also commented that drivers like Verstappen have always pushed boundaries to maximize their competitive edge. If the rules allow a certain style of racing, someone like Max will use it to full effect, he remarked. However, now that the FIA is clamping down on such tactics, Wolff predicts we'll see a more measured approach from all drivers moving forward. The stewards seem to have drawn a new line in the sand, and from Brazil onwards, everyone will have to adhere to it. From now on, Wolff added, pushing someone off the track will likely result in a 5 or 10-second penalty, no exceptions. The inconsistency in previous stewarding decisions has caused friction among teams and drivers. In the past, leniency towards certain aggressive maneuvers left room for interpretation, legitimizing questionable actions. Wolff acknowledged this by saying, "In the past, drivers got away with certain moves because penalties were rarely given. That set a precedent." He emphasized that having rules in place is one thing, but enforcing them consistently is what really matters. Interestingly, despite being on the receiving end of Verstappen's aggressive tactics in the past, Wolff surprisingly defended him, noting that such bold moves have always been part of the sport's DNA. Back in 2021, we saw similar battles between Max and Hamilton. They were intense, sometimes brutal, but that's what racing is all about. Max hasn't changed, he still races with the same intensity. It's just that now, the sport is becoming more competitive and drivers need to adapt quickly. The upcoming 2025 season is shaping up to be the most competitive in over a decade, with multiple challengers expected to vie for the championship. This only heightens the need for clear regulations, leaving no room for ambiguity. Wolff stressed that both drivers and stewards must abide by these rules, especially with the FIA under increasing pressure to appoint neutral stewards to avoid any accusations of bias. Lando Norris has also weighed in on the ongoing debate about hard racing, sharing his thoughts on the recent battles with Verstappen. While he admitted that racing against Max has always been thrilling, Norris emphasized that such encounters are bound to spark controversy. "I enjoy these battles," Norris remarked, "but it was only a matter of time before something like this happened. You can't keep pushing the limits forever without facing consequences." Norris acknowledged that Verstappen's aggressive style makes him a formidable opponent, but he also expressed frustration. "When you race against Max, you know he's going to fight for every inch, whether he wins or comes second. He'll sacrifice his own race just to beat you, like he did today. I love a tough fight, but it has to be fair." His remarks reflected the growing sentiment among drivers. While fierce competition is welcome, reckless behavior will no longer be tolerated. The recent race in Mexico was a perfect example of how challenging it can be to compete against Verstappen. According to Norris, he had to actively avoid collisions during the race, which left him feeling uneasy. When you're on the track, the last thing you want is to feel forced into avoiding accidents. It takes the joy out of racing, he explained. With Verstappen already having secured a comfortable lead in the championship, Norris argued that Max had nothing to lose by taking risks, further complicating things for his rivals. People might say he has everything to lose because he's at the top, but that's not how it feels when you're racing him. It's as if he's always ready to risk it all. Looking ahead, Brazil presents an even bigger challenge for Verstappen. It's rumored that he'll face a 5-place grid penalty due to an engine component change, which could significantly affect his performance. If the penalty holds, Verstappen will likely find himself starting behind 2 Ferraris and at least 1 McLaren, which could put his championship defense in jeopardy. This development puts added pressure on McLaren, particularly Oscar Piastri, whose recent performances have been underwhelming. The team desperately needs him to step up, not only to support Norris but also to keep McLaren competitive in the Constructors' Championship. Ferrari has made significant progress, and the Maranello-based team is now dangerously close to challenging McLaren for the top spot. With just a few races left, every point will matter as both teams battle for supremacy. With the intense battles unfolding on the track, the focus now shifts to whether the drivers will respect the new interpretations of the rules. Will aggressive racers like Verstappen adapt to these changes, or will they continue to push the limits, forcing the FIA to impose harsher penalties? The race in Brazil will serve as the first real test of the drivers' willingness to embrace this shift. If the stewards remain consistent, Drivers will no longer have the freedom to aggressively defend their position at the apex without facing consequences. This issue has divided opinions among fans and pundits alike. Some believe that the FIA's stricter approach is necessary to ensure fair competition, while others argue that it takes away the very essence of racing. Verstappen's supporters claim that his hard-nosed style is what makes him exciting to watch, while critics argue that the penalties are long overdue. The key now lies in how these rules will be enforced moving forward and whether the FIA can maintain consistency without over-regulating. Toto Wolff has expressed optimism about these changes, predicting that they will set a new standard for racing behavior. If stewards stick to these interpretations, we'll see fewer incidents and more respectful racing. It's up to everyone to follow the guidelines, he said. The drivers, too, seem to understand that pushing the boundaries will no longer go unchecked. As Wolff mentioned, once drivers know that every aggressive move carries a real risk, they'll think twice before acting recklessly. As fans brace for the thrilling conclusion to the 2024 season, they also eagerly await news from Red Bull about who will line up next to Verstappen in 2025. With rumors swirling about potential shakeups within the team, the excitement isn't just limited to the track. The drivers know that every race, every decision, and every overtaking move could make or break their seasons and perhaps even their careers. With the drama set to unfold in Brazil and beyond, the drivers and teams will have no room for hesitation. The stage is set for an epic showdown, and motorsport enthusiasts around the globe are ready to witness history in the making. What happens next will shape not only the final standings but the future of Formula One itself.